Hello, Grizzlies. This is C-Rob doing an introduction to William Faulkner's A Rose for Emily. The Commanders are playing tonight, so I always hope, like John Riggins is going to show up, the Diesel. But anyway, William Faulkner was born in Oxford, Mississippi. He spent most of his youth there. He worked at the bookstore. I believe he was the postmaster. Most of his stories deal with families in rural Mississippi. Sometimes they're rich, sometimes they're poor, sometimes they're Caucasian, sometimes they're African American. But it's sort of life in rural Mississippi after World War I, basically. As he got older and became a famous writer, he became more of a rock star. He was an expatriate in Paris. He hung out with Ernest Hemingway, traveled the world. For a little while, he was a visiting professor at UVA. There's a lot of UVA stuff you could research. Then he went out to Hollywood. He was a screenwriter, alcoholic, and I believe when he died, he fell off a horse. A lot of he's pretty famous for his writing style, which is stream of consciousness. Hemingway was A to B to C, linear, kind of minimalistic. William Faulkner is kind of how real people think in real time, how real people talk in real time. So it's kind of all over the map, goes back in time, goes into the future, but it's how real people talk. And, sometimes when I'm lecturing, maybe I pretend like I'm a squirrel or something. So it's how real people talk in real time. Also, some of his literature, since he grew up in the South, is he's sort of lost cause Southern literature. The idea that the South lost the war, but they're beautiful losers. And I don't tell Fredericksburg I said that, but that's sort of the concept. Maybe in our story, A Rose for Emily, there's some punishment for slavery. And if you've listened to my other lectures, I think there's a theme of guilt and punishment in American literature. So sort of what happens to the South after the Civil War. Another reason I picked Rose for Emily, I'm taking care of my mother. She has a bit of dementia. I'm in the house with her all day. It's sort of like the Robinson family line. So A Rose for Emily makes me think a bit about like the state of my family. I'm not married. I don't have any children. What that means, maybe I'll turn into like Crazy Emily. I don't know. I hope not. But anyway, the story itself, Miss Emily is an old kooky Southern lady, doesn't pay her taxes. We'll talk a lot about who the narrator is and what Faulkner's doing with the narrator, but it's pretty quirky and odd the way he narrates the story. You really kind of don't ever know who's talking or generally what year it is. But Miss Emily's a kooky old Southern lady. She doesn't pay her taxes, and the town kind of lets her get away with it. There's a Colonel Sartoris that goes to collect her taxes, and she's like, we don't pay taxes. So it has to do with her father. She lived with her father for a while. She's a spinster. Her father passes away. She's not married. She doesn't have any children. And the town kind of treats her like a kooky old lady. Maybe that has something to do with like the South as well, or Southern themes. She does have a boyfriend for a while, Homer, and he mysteriously disappears. And we don't find out until the end. Like, don't listen if you don't want to hear. But she kills him, poisons him, and keeps his body like in her bed for the rest of her life, 20, 30 years. And at the end of the story, they find Homer's body, but it's kind of gothic. It's a little bit some horror there. Maybe you call it gothic grotesque. And in the past, I've taught several Faulkner novels. I've taught As I Lay Dying is my favorite. In that story, the matriarch of an old Southern family dies, and they're trying to take her coffin, her body, to her hometown to bury her. and her body gets lost in the river. So it's like a comedy of errors. It's absurd. It's grotesque. But the family is trying to get the body after the coffin breaks away in a river. So I told you about, I'm looking at some of my notes. I told you a bit about Rose for Emily. I wrote Southern Gothic, horror, absurd, non-linear, multiple voices, no objective truth. So a lot of times in a story, it's A to B to C. Smoking cigarettes are bad. Don't smoke cigarettes. But in this story, it's kind of all over the map. If there were 5 people in the room and everyone was talking, there's no objective truth. There's 5 smaller subjective truths. Everyone thinking what they want to think. There's also, there's a noblesse oblige. For Hemingway, I talked about code of masculinity. In the Old South, there's a code of Southern aristocracy. What a Southern lady would do, what a Southern lady wouldn't do. So there is, in the story, there's one bad word. There should be a couple of my old students in the class. We're friends. We'll be nice to each other. I think we can deal with like the naughty word that's in the story, and you can probably figure out what the naughty word is. But, it has to do with racism, impact of the Civil War. To that point, maybe since Fredericksburg gets a lot of tourism, we might discuss something to do with Fredericksburg and the Civil War and how we deal with people, millions of people coming every year to tour the battlefields or whatever. But it has to do with the South after the Civil War. Fredericksburg is kind of a part of that. If I go to the questions at the end, the first one is, how do the townspeople react to Miss Emily as a community chorus? And everyone in the town kind of treats her as like a kooky old lady. She doesn't pay her taxes. She murders her boyfriend, but everyone in the town treats her like a kooky old lady. And I wonder if that's still in play in places like Orange, Culpeper, Madison, in the wilderness. If there's a kooky old lady, Miss whoever, they call my mom Miss Lee at the doctor's office at McDonald's, and kind of Miss Lee can get away with things that C-Rob can't. But it's how the community interprets, deals with the kooky old lady. And they seem to like her. They don't hate on her, even though she killed Homer, her boyfriend. She's kooky old lady. The second question asks about the significance of the title, A Rose for Emily. If you give someone a rose, it's kind of like a salute, giving someone roses, a tribute to them. So they kind of like her, whatever she does, because she's a kooky old lady. Number 3 asks about the women in Rose for Emily. Ultimately, women in the South in the 1930s are still kind of property. It begs some feminist questions about what a woman could do in 1930 if she doesn't have a husband, if her father dies, how she deals with the world. So it's kind of, number 3, I would say, has to do with post-Civil War feminism. Number 3 asks about the narrative structure of the story. Faulkner's famous for his stream of consciousness style. He would call it circling the truth, in the sense there's no objective truth in our world. It's just people kind of doing their own spins on the truth. They're dancing around the truth. Number 5 is kind of like number 1. It's the narrator's opinion of Emily. And I think you could say Emily symbolizes Southern culture. So as the years go by, after the Civil War, the concept of being a beautiful loser, we handle Miss Emily with kid gloves because she's like from the past. You could say, do we give older people more slack because they're old? We let them do what they want. And then the last question says basically to compare women in A Rose for Emily to women in Hills Like White Elephants, the Hemingway story. So both of those women Hemingway and Faulkner are contemporaries. It's 1925, it's 1930. How are women treated? What are the options for women in the 1930s? Okay, I think that's good. I'm going to exercise again. Look for John Riggins. Bye.